I'm going to tell you, another question I get a lot of is that people are always wondering, they say, where did the program come from? You know? And I said to them, I said, look around you. It came from everywhere. I took the program from everything, from life itself. And it answers the burning question, what is life energy anyway? And the system that I will show you comes directly from an understanding of radiation. I talked a little bit to you about the effects of electricity and radiation on the human body causing side effects. Okay? How can an invisible thing make you ill? You go out in the sun, for instance. Well, you can see the sun, that's different. But if I was to expose you to gamma rays for a certain length of time, you would start to get sick. Did you see the people at Chernobyl? What happened to them? They got sick. You know, their hair fell out and skin peeled off, and, you know. This is what happened to people after a nuclear power plant disaster, okay? And what I studied to create the program, the basic foundations of the program, that we're talking about the computer program now, a computer program that is used to detect the answers to your particular symptoms. And I say the answers to your symptoms on a basis of, if we were to find the reason why you have a headache and remove it, then you wouldn't have a headache anymore. And if you did that methodically with all the symptoms, I'm sure if you made a list, you would find you had a big list of symptoms, right? And if we methodically found the answers to each one of them, then they would all be gone. And it would free up the channels of energy in your system so that finally you can be what you were meant to be. Now, if your genetic program says that you were meant to be a toad, then you will be a toad. A better toad. You won't have a fungus growing on your nose like you did before, but you will be at least a very good toad. Now, if your genetic program said you should be, you know, a very powerful, strong person, then you will be the best that you can be. And that's what the program is all about, to promote that system. And so, to developing that idea, we had to develop a computer base that was universal. As I said earlier, what was the sense of having a program that didn't answer every question? That where the person running the program had to scratch his head all the time and say, well, gee, where'd that come from? They had to develop a system that could give answers for everything, all the time. And so, to do that, we had to base the program on the most basic energy that there is in the universe. And that is the energy coming from stars and suns, radiation, hydrogen emission, okay? Now, it was really easy to see the relationship between this hydrogen emission and the human body by studying radiation. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, what happens when the human body is exposed to this radiation and concentrated? Those could show us a whole lot about how the person relates to their own system and to their own disease mechanism. In other words, each day, if you realize it or not, when the sun comes up, you're being exposed to hydrogen radiation. A very small, tiny part of it. Okay? Very tiny. But hydrogen radiation just the same. And you realize by your experience that by standing out in the sun for long periods of time, you could develop symptoms. I mean, if you're out in the sun for 10 hours straight and without any clothes on, you're going to have some symptoms. You're going to have a headache. You're going to have you know, a lot of different skin reactions and problems that you didn't have before. So, the idea of the program was to develop a system based around the actual tissue decay in the system, the human system, and its exposure to hydrogen radiation. So when you're doing the program, you'll see numbers come in. All the information that comes out of the computer is based on a numbered system from 1 to 24. I'll put 1, There's 24 numbers in the computer system. And each one of these numbers is related to an organ system and an emotional tract that decays in the presence of hydrogen radiation. In other words, all you have to do is live, and you're going to get a dose of energy that will affect these organs. As long as you're alive, because every time that the sun comes up, you're going to be affected by this. Now, to accelerate this 1 to 24 system, to break down the tissues in your body faster, all you need to do is to stand at ground zero when a hydrogen bomb goes off. And these systems will decay very rapidly, all within a microsecond probably, but they will go from 1 to 24, just as we predicted. In other words, certain organs, even in the moment of the flash that hits you, will break down before other organs do. And that's very significant, because those organs are the organs that are outputting your symptom patterns, are they not? In other words, if your heart, which is number 2, is palpitating, then it must have a certain ratio of energy on it that is being created by an outside pressure. If we can change the ratio of energy on the organ, then that heart palpitation should stop. You see? So you're probably saying, well, what's an energy ratio? Well, let's say the heart in its normal state beats at 60 beats per minute. But when you put bromine straight into the body, bromine gas, that changes the energy ratio. And the bromine has an affinity for the heart. Bingo. And then the heart starts to react to it. You're going to say, well, wait a second. I thought you said sun radiation. What's this bromine stuff? That's a whole nother, that's an element. Well, if you read the Prometheon, which is a work that I developed in 1980, you'll find out that bromine is merely an extension of sun radiation, as predicted by the periodic table of elements. You'll find out that every element is merely an extension of sun radiation. So that aluminum, wood, tin, any metal, fire itself, everything is basically part of the building blocks of sun radiation. Everything that you see on this planet was once generated from the sun. I got to think about that a little bit. I know it's really hard to understand, but when developing a program this massive, you have to understand that energies in your body and on the ground and in the sky were once part of the sun. And that is a very significant statement. And I'm saying it to you to separate the men from the boys. If you think about it long enough and you understand it, then you can be part of this program. And if you cannot understand that and you will not accept it or believe it, then you need to study some more. You need to go to a library and learn more about the energies that surround you. If the sun were to turn off tomorrow, everything on this planet would implode and explode through the nuclei of every atom and be sucked toward the black hole where the sun used to burn red hot. Now, you don't want that to happen, do you? So then you're going to have to listen to this. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to give you the breakdown of each step. Now what we're saying here is that a normally healthy human being in the presence of increased radiation, which could be in any form. And I say increased radiation. I say just let us take a healthy human being. Let us take Adam, or whoever the boy was in the Blue Lagoon, who had absolutely no health problems, stark naked there on the beach. Okay, in the presence of the sun, we can consider that the sun be a pressure, a very light pressure. At first it starts off as almost a gentle teasing kind of energy, which is fun to play with. After a while, when the sun is allowed to bake onto a body, the organs start to break down. It can't handle that much of the same kind of radiation. What we're saying here is that radiation in our terms could be anything coming from a source that was once sun generated. Or at the same time, it can be spiritually generated. In other words, radiation can be considered when an individual is yelled at by someone else. When someone gets angry at another person and radiates energy at them by yelling at them, then that could be considered radiation. And that can cause this breakdown sequence to occur. It could be food. It could be radiation coming from fluorescent lights, electrical wires, body odor from another person. Anything, any energy that interferes or intersects or interacts with the human body can cause this breakdown pattern to occur. Now the first area of the body, according to our plan, according to our investigations and our programming, and you have to study this very closely because this is the credo of the program, the thymus gland is the first area that breaks down the presence of radiation. Well, why the thymus? Well, the thymus is a gland that is your radiation monitor. It is your protector. It is the gland that's in the body to monitor all phases of radiation coming in and coming out. The thymus is insulted when someone yells at you. The thymus, in the presence of anger from another person, or attack, or verbal abuse, degradation, invalidation, or abnegation, anything that is thrown at you to degrade you, the thymus will kick into being and create a system of protection. Now, in the medical terms, there's a very fancy term for protection. It's called the reticuloendothelial endothelial system. This is a special word that you're not supposed to know about because this is their word. Now we're going to use our word as protection. It's okay. There's nothing printed anywhere in the universe that says fancy words will replace simple words. Okay? Simple words are the best words to use. What happens is when you're hit by any means on the outside or on the inside, the thymus protective mechanism is the first mechanism alerted. And if this is breached, it's the first one to go down. It has to go down. If the invaders are going to get inside you to do their little dirty work, they have to breach your protective system. They have to break through your walls, your screens. They got to knock your barriers down. If you've got a good, strong defense, it's going to be real hard for people to get through to you. But if you're weak and you're not as wily as some other people, you may fall very easily to the simplest things. Ever see people react when a little bee comes in the house, you know, something like that? Some people, you know, if they're strong enough, they'll swat the bee. Other people, you know, because what's happened is the protective mechanisms are all an alarm because they know that a lot of the screens are wasted. And if the bee gets in and stings that body, then that person may suffer anaphylactic shock or go into an incredible histamine reaction. So that's the first system. Now, along with this, we've developed an emotional guide, which is another simple term, right? We give you another simple term as an emotional guide so that you understand this first number. And the reason why we're doing this in the first place is that the computer thinks all in numbers. It doesn't think in these terms. It has to be translated. And if you see this number 1 come out in your program, then you think these things. Protection. Someone's trying to breach my protective barriers. Okay? But that's what you have to think of. Now, On the emotional scale, we put the term aggression up, so that you understand that it is aggression that you're trying to deal with. Any kind of aggression at all. It could be, a drug could be an aggression on your system. Just a drug. Now, the interesting thing about it is some people don't even know they're aggressing their own system. It's being done to them very surreptitiously. In other words, someone's convinced them that this is what they need, and in fact, you have let loose the fox in the chicken coop. And it's only because you're misinformed. So it's very important that if you see a number 1 come up in the chain link of numbers in your system when the computer has analyzed you, that you got to think about the fact that you have allowed aggression to take form in your system, somehow or another. Now, the second system that breaks down the presence of excess radiation is the heart. Okay? Now, the heart is a mechanism, of course, that's just there to pump fluids around your body. I say we're just pumping fluids around, but if you don't put the red blood cells around the system, then the cells that are your system won't get fed. Okay? It's majorly a system for feeding and nourishing of the whole body, and in the cases of emergency, for transporting arms and ammunition to the cells to fight off aggressors. So if, let's say, a germ gets in your system, a virus, a bug, a toxin, and it proliferates to all the cells, then you've got to have some pretty good circulation to make sure that you get energies, right protective mechanisms in there to ward it off. We're looking at, on this side, the idea of synchronization. When radiation hits the body or you're aggressed against, one of the first things that goes out, past protection, is your ability to synchronize yourself. In other words, you go out of balance. And balance is extremely important. This is exactly what the person needs to keep himself straight. In other words, when a person's first born, even a little baby, when they come out, you'll watch them, when they come out of the mother, the arms are starting to go like this. Right away, they're starting to catch their balance. They're trying to get the exact balance of their energy. So, when poisons get into the system, one of the first areas that are affected is your synchronization and your balance, the leveling of your energy, keeping everything in harmony. So you could use the word harmony here. So you could say that a person who is hurt, that has been aggressed against, let's say if someone is very angry towards you and breaches your protective field and leaves you with a disgruntled feeling, there's a state of disharmony. And if there's a state of disharmony, that means he's reached the second level. Whatever, we look at this as an overall scale. Going to level 2 means that when there's disharmony in the system, whatever has aggressed against you has really driven deep into your system enough to create this disharmony. On the emotional side, it's a case of love. Heart is always related to love, the feelings of love, and let's say, love, the absence of, creation of, destruction of. In other words, if a person has this harmony and then they are invaded, they have disharmony and they may have dislove. In other words, the correct energies that produce this harmonic, balanced feeling start to go out, and in place of love comes jealousy and other emotions which are detrimental to the system. Now, if you see a 2 come up in your chain link, and if it's the first number, then this is what you have to focus on. There's a matter of dissynchronization, of disharmony. Something's wrong with the heart system. Again, it's the pressurizations of the driving in of radiation of the same type. Radiation of different types does not create the same effect. It has to be the same kind. In other words, if someone's mad at you or angry at you, then they would have to drive the same kind of anger with the same kind of hatred in with a lot of force and volume continually to drive deeper down the scale. It's almost like ringing the bell at the carnival. To make the bell ring, you've got to really swing the hammer down on the person. So in other words, to really breach your protective mechanism, somebody's really got to get angry at you. Or maybe they don't have to get so angry at you if you have weak defensive systems. Some people have good defensive systems, so a person can get angry all he wants, and he never breaks through. Another person is very, very weak and fragile. All you have to do is say boo to them, and they break through not only the protective barriers, but down into this barrier here, and then create disharmony like that. Now you know a person's sick if you come in, if the husband comes in and says, hey hun, where's my dinner? And bango, she goes into disharmony just by saying that, there's something wrong. Okay? If a person is that irritable and can't handle anything that even smacks of a little bit of pressure, then it means that they already have problems there that they haven't resolved. Now the next level that falls apart, and these levels, of course, were studied from a lot of films that were looked at that were done by the USDA. I'm not a proponent of vivisection, okay? But there was a lot of studies, radiation studies, done on animals by exposing them to high levels of radiation. It was very gory, messy. I hated it looking at it, but it was fantastic information on the basis of what organs were breaking down in the system first. And I am a proponent for anti-vivisection because I didn't really think they had to do that because they had enough information from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but they had to repeat it over and over again on the animals, and they caused some incredible carnage on like cattle. They were doing on thousands and thousands of cows were destroyed by these tests. Anyway, we found out that the colon area drops out next. It's just in presence of high levels of radiation, the colon completely goes flaccid, falls apart, and hemorrhages. And so in other words, if you were in a nuclear power plant reactor when it accidentally melted down or near a hydrogen explosion, then you could expect within a couple of weeks that you will be disemboweled. The radiation will just break the seams of your colon. Very messy. Okay. Hopefully we won't have to see that. Detoxification. That is a level called detoxification or toxification. When you hit 3 levels down with your intrusion, when you're angry at somebody enough and you've been able to pierce their protective barriers and make them disharmonic, you can destroy them by toxifying them. In other words, on level 3, when you hit the colon, your anger, your drug, your radiation, your poison, whatever it is that got into the system, if it hits this level, you've toxified them. If you're trying to hurt somebody or mash them or kill them or destroy them, your main aim is to toxify them. It's really interesting. Women are really susceptible to this. When they're hit really hard with a pressure or stress, they develop colitis. It's not uncommon. A lot of women, especially women that have had children, and their colons are a little weak, being pushed around a lot, and maybe they're constipated, and they're very easy, susceptible to toxify. So, detoxification is the answer for this level. To fix this level, detoxify. Toxify is what happens to a person if enough pressure is put on the person, colon starts to react. First the thymus react, then the heart. But this is enough pressure. The Chinese water torture, you know. I imagine if you put somebody under, we haven't tried this experiment yet, but we put somebody under a pipe and let water drip on them for a week and a half. Imagine that each one of these levels would start to go in turn. The emotion that comes out is hatred. It's a rejective emotion. Now, all these systems are really reactions of pressure in that they're primarily made to have the body respond to the radiation that's coming in. For example, the protective level is trying to push the radiation away. On this level, the harmonic level is trying to, it grabs the radiation and tries to balance it or juggle it, like this. On this level, again, it tries to then shove it away. So on the third level, you're getting that shoving away process. And then what happens is the human body, the mind in connection with it, the person becomes perceptive of that and feels these energies trying to push away, like they know something's the matter. And these are the signals that are given to a human being when he's in the presence of some danger. He can feel his body trying to push something away, you know? Okay. Now, on the fourth level, area very close to the colon, the gastrointestinal tract is, you know, very, very connected to this area. Radiation 3 and 4 hits the gastrointestinal tract. And the energy is very different at this time. Containment, holding things together, holding them, and the radiation, instead of an out-pushing, once the body gives up and says, hey, this thing's too much for me to push away, it then tries to hold it or contain it. In other words, it's almost like a snake, a boa constrictor, or a cobra that got into your house. Once you try to beat it off with a stick, and then you realize the thing's not going to go away, your next best bet is to get a bucket or something, or a box, and try to put it over the top of it and try to contain it. So, all right, so it won't leave, but maybe we can get this thing to just stay in a little square area. So again, the body is trying to contain the danger. It realizes that things are getting dangerous. Got 24 levels to go before you're wiped out, but it's on the fourth level. Mind and body get together and say, hey, whatever this energy is, it's powerful. It can consume the body, so we got to try to contain it. The thing that goes off is a state of happiness. Anybody that complains that they're unhappy, they hit this. They usually have digestive troubles too. It's really interesting. Got a big, I'm not happy. It's really like kind of a joke, because they always say people with big stomachs are jolly, you know. But they're not really that jolly. They're really the reverse. They're there with the big stomach containing. They're holding all of the poison and the pressure and the anger and the anguish and the buildup of all the travail that they've had over their lifetime sometimes in this pot sitting in front of them, you see. So the issue is happiness. Now I'll erase these and go on to the next one. And this is an answer to the burning question, where did this program come from? I'm answering, where did it come from? Again, reiterate that studies made on radiation decay and breakdown series of the human body and its relationship with intelligence is where it came from. And that's the logic of the order that was developed is the development of the computer programs and all the relationships to the ancillary statements. For example, happiness is a very broad and general statement and deals with level 4. We have statements in the program such as unable to find true lover or something like that. I mean, that's obviously a conglomeration or a concoction of several numbers in a different expression. In other words, we can then take numbers and intersect them and make expressions with them. Instead of having to just use one number, we could, to define an individual's condition, use 6 or 7 numbers. And that's called a chain, okay? All right, the next level that breaks down is the pituitary gland. Now, the reason why the pituitary gland, this is the anterior pituitary, this is the front portion of the pituitary gland, breaks down because the anterior pituitary gland itself is the mechanism that makes you look the way you look. If you hit the 5th level, then it means that the radiation, the pressure, the poison that is moving inside the body has enough power to change the visual structure of the body. Now you got some real bad troubles, okay? And this is what happens when the sun is moving into the body, just by laying out and getting a sunburn or a suntan on the beach. The pituitary gland is affected, and what happens basically is that the body is changing. It's different now. Skin shortening, you're getting different colors, and the pituitary gland is the gland that puts the signals out to make you look the way you're supposed to look. You see. And on this level, I'm basically looking at balance and control. And balance control on level 5 is looked at in the sense that the body is trying to control the balance between what actually is in the body, what's there, and what's in the genetic program. In other words, the genes are telling the body to look a certain way, and now this outside pressure is coming in and trying to transmit its own signal and saying, no, I don't think he should have a thumb that big. I think he should have a thumb this big. And you're probably laughing, but that's acromegaly. It's a real disease. It happens in cancer people where the digits just get 8-10 times the size. And it's incredible swelling of fluids that occurs because, of course, the pituitary gland controls the fluid balance and all that. So, any complaints of the person losing control? I'm sure you've heard that emotionally when a person says, "Geez, I'm out of control." He says, I can't cope with things anymore. That's level 5, okay? And if your chain of numbers, as we analyze you, comes up with a 5 in the front, then you're looking directly at a control problem, okay? Now, and we'll go on to 6. The next area that's hit is the liver. And the liver area, which is your main battery in the body, I mean, that's the body part that holds all of the electrical transmissions, concerned with the ability of transmutation. Okay, now this is a very important ability because all through a person's life they are trying to get outside energies, take them in, and transmutate them into inside energies. In other words, but when you're eating food, I mean, let's look at it in its reality. I mean, if you go down to a nice turkey dinner, you're trying to turn this bird into you, you know. I mean, if the bird remains a bird, you got some big troubles. I mean, you've got indigestion. So in a lot of ways, your aggressions on the environment are very similar to the aggressions against you. So it's either eat or be eaten, realistically. Now, these actions, if they are stopped or stymied or broken in any way, in other words, if you are progressing, trying to change something, if you're trying to take energies and make them into your energy, if you're trying to build a bridge or get along with somebody and it's not working, and your complaints are of sadness, then it means this action has been interrupted with. Transmutation. So a person says, I'm sad all the time, I can't get what I want, they have the blues constantly, they have melancholy, then you've got this problem here. Now that's pressure level 6. That means that the energy is really getting in there and is actually stopping your ability to change energies from the outside into your energy, which is bad, because you want to keep the pressure off you so that you're constantly converting energies from the outside to your energy. A lot of people will complain of indigestion from this. Gas, inability to assimilate. And also, they will have the inabilities of perception as well. Things become hard to understand. They cannot take concepts and transmutate them into their own understanding. 7. Then the lungs. This is the next level that's hit. And the idea is exchange, exchanging energies. And the emotion is monotony. The lungs should just work, without any, if you've got any, the lungs get interesting, they start making some curious noises, like rails or coughing, hawking, barking, constantly clearing your throat, anything to do with that, then your exchange of energy in the system is not working correctly. In other words, you're taking 5 in and putting 4 out. It should be an even exchange constantly throughout the system. Lungs are hurt by pressures and radiations. Very important area of the body. Remember that the lungs are directly associated with the most important digestive and ingestive process you have. That is taking energies from the air, which you do constantly. I mean, you can cut a person's food off and they may live for 3 months. But if you cut their air off, they got about 3 minutes. So the air is where you're being fed constantly. So when it gets down to lucky 7, and this starts to get interrupted, then you know that pressure is cutting in on something very intrinsically valuable to the person's survival. In other words, the danger that has come into the system has become incredibly dangerous. Now, when we say monotony, we're talking about the fact that the person has no change, that it is monotonous in the case that the person has a chronic illness. And when it hits the level of monotony, when the person has a 7 in front of their chain, then we know that that person has a chronic illness, something that's been there constantly, and isn't about to leave very easily. See? And that's, something that we find a lot of and that we're interested in. It doesn't mean we can't get rid of it. It means he has to do something drastic to get rid of it. Now, effectively, 0 to 7, we've covered the direct human body. When we hit into the 8th area, the sex organs, we're going directly to the genetic aspects of procreation. In other words, now we're not only hitting, it's sort of like the entity or the energy that's attacking you is not only hitting you now, it's going after your family. Now it's like the mafia, it's like going to wipe everybody out, And the state of being that is expressed is apathy. And it is a feeling that one cannot do anything about it. It's just that the energy has the power and the pressure of this invasion. Now I'm talking about something that could be just the aggression of one person towards the other verbally, by anger. It could be a drug. It could be, for instance, LSD will hit this level easily when a person takes LSD. Bingo, right to the chromosomes. I mean, that's a known fact. So we know that the energy and the power of LSD has enough radiation potential in it to breach the protective barriers, create tremendous disharmony in the system. Now the person is doing this all because he wants to go on a trip and wants to imbalance the system just so he can have a lot of fun, which doesn't last a whole long time in relationship to the genetic structure, but he does that. He breaches that disharmony mechanism, then goes and he toxifies himself. Then the body tries to contain and control it, but it can't. And then finally that radiation comes in and just completely destroys the person's ability to transmutate energies from the outside to the inside, and then upsets the exchange values of energy in the body. So ultimately it hits the genes and records its miasma in the genes and passes it on for generations to experience. In other words, what you have there is chromosome damage. Okay? But how is that done? Well, LSD is a very, very powerful drug. It's a powerful piece of radiation, and it makes big changes. Okay, the 9th one. Now we get into the bones and muscles. Remember that the bones and muscles are the 9th area that are degraded in the state of radiation, the same radiation of the same wavelength chronically, or a lot of similar radiation that can move on the same track. It doesn't have to be the exact same radiation, it could be similar radiation. So, this is the real big quirk, is that a person, now you got to follow this because it's really important, a person can be working in a nuclear power plant and get a big dose of radiation, and he could stick his head in a microwave oven and get a big dose of radiation like that, and they would be the similar radiations and would create a pressure circumstance to affect his organs in a decay pattern. And then, by some quirk of intelligence, the person can then get in an argument with his wife and misconstrue or collect that radiation into the same pot and say, that's the same thing. And that's where intelligence comes into play and really disturbs this whole mechanism, destroys it totally. It's because the mind can just make a law, just decree that anger is the same as nuclear power plant radiation. And that person comes home from the nuclear power plant and his wife just says peep to him like that and he hits the ceiling because it's too much. And she hasn't even said anything. And that poor lady can't figure out why he's so upset and irritable. It can go for anything. If the mind says that it's that way, then it can be that way. So the bones and muscles are where all the reactions take place. And this is the area where the person is mainly considered with structure, framework. Okay? And I was saying where structure precedes function. If the person's structure has a certain mechanism, in other words, you're set up a certain way, obviously we're not structured to live in trees, so we don't. You know, like what is the exact structure of the human body and what the functions are depend on what the person does in life. Some theories say function controls structure. So the more you do a certain function, the more your structure will change. For example, if you get weights and you pick them up over and over again, and you should get big muscles to accommodate the function of picking up these weights. Anybody complains of any pains whatsoever is level 9. If they say, hey, I've got a pain in my head, they're level 9. That's all there is to it. In other words, when the body is signaling a pain, I've got a pain, you've got a level 9 radiation pressure in the body. If you have a pain, it has already, this pressure, this radiation, this poison, has already breached your protective mechanisms, disturbed your harmony, toxified you. You have to admit that already. I mean, if there's a pain there, there's a toxin sitting in there. Your body's tried to contain it somehow or another. The poison has literally knocked you out of balance, has messed up your ability to digest, make exchanges in the system that are viable to it, which is very scary, because let's say you have to make an exchange with the duodenum and the pancreas for digestive juices, it could create diabetes, whatever it is, okay? It is, if you have a pain, it's already saying, hey guys, I already wrote in the genetic blueprint, your kids are going to get it. That's what's happening. Pain is a signal that it's reached the 9th level. Any kind of pain. So it means it's something big. All right? That means it's something that you really got to pay attention to. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next level, which is the level that is directly associated with the level 10. 24 levels there are. 24 functions. It's a little complicated, there's no doubt, but we will wade through it to get you the right answers. That's why we had to put it all on computer. Okay, now, the 10th area that's broken down, thyroid. And the thyroid is a very special area. It's very, a lot of people know about it in science, that radiation directly affects the thyroid. But then we're talking about a composite of radiation that covers everything universally. So could a person be yelled at, or could they be, let's say, attacked in any way where they would have their thyroid affected? In other words, can a husband yell at a wife and affect her thyroid? Well, we're saying radiation can be observed in any way, manner, shape, or form in the human body, and certainly if a person yells loud enough, really lays into a person, and the mind construes it as such, then the thyroid can be affected. There's no doubt about it. And this is an area of metabolism. This means, again, changing energies, controlling energies, the balance of energies in the system to help the body look the way it's supposed to look. This is the area that can take energies from one part of the body and send it to another to try to help patch it up. You know, if there's a hole in your foot, then the thyroid can help as a dispatcher to get energies from the soft tissue and soft muscle from your rear end to send it down to your foot to fill the hole in, you know. Well, if that's affected, then that means that stuff's not going to get repaired. You're never going to get repaired. You know, there are going to be sores and all kinds of degradations in the body. Your roads aren't going to be fixed. You're going to have potholes for a long time, and you have to call the Department of Transportation to try to fill in all of the little nooks and crannies in your body, and you start to lose that young look. When this is hit, you get old. That's all there is to it. Because the thyroid is the thing that keeps you young. I mean, it keeps you looking smooth, you know. And any person complains the anxieties of getting old, worried about old age, anxiety. People that are nervous about the future primarily. They keep saying, gee, I wonder what's going to happen in 2 years. You know, like, oh, who cares? You know? And they always mention things about, like, well, I might not be here. You know, that's the thyroid. All right, we go on 11. 11 is the basically the veins. I put the veins and the arteries, and primarily the lower extremities. Again, this area is hit, starts to collapse, hemorrhage, in the presence of high levels of radiation, gamma rays. We've seen that the veins and arteries, the lower extremities, start to hemorrhage. People who have varicose veins, all you have to do is look down their legs, and you see varicose veins, varicosities. That means that the pressure that is affecting them directly is enough to destroy that area of the body then it must be looked at, okay, because it's getting in there very deep. And we're interested primarily in circulation. Circulation, if the person is not able to circulate through the body the energies that are necessary, then you will have some real peculiar problems. And it is the problems that develop into a slow death, really. What the person was worried about up here on 10 starts to become true on 11. And if you ever hear them speaking of the past and really mad about, gee, if I only did it another way, I wouldn't be in this trouble right now. And you get a lot of resentment. You hear the resentment of blaming things on other people. They're starting to totally lose responsibility for it, and they have totally lost the ability to find the right target, like who or what is really bothering them. They start to blame. This resentment is really a missed target. They've targeted the wrong person. They don't know who is responsible for their problems, whether it's them or themselves or what. So resentment is a mistargeting process. At 12, we hit the brain. Now, the brain really kind of likes radiation. I mean, it is radiation. It's a radiation, you know. I mean, you can fire all kinds of radiation into it. That's why it's not as bad to take CAT scans of the brain as it is to take other parts of the body, because the other parts of the body aren't that much affinity to radiation the way the brain does. The brain is always, there's messages going in and out. Only problem is, sometimes you can interfere radiation within the system. Yes, there is a lady who is suing medical college for giving her a CAT scan, and she says that it stopped her from being a psychic. You know, radiation has now set up a barrier and destroyed her psychic ability, which I believe thoroughly, but that's something for them to kick around. I don't know what it's worth. I think it was a $15 million suit. We're dealing with the electric part. And with electricity, it's definitely the proliferation of ideas and energies into the system and into the environment. In other words, the brain is the entity, its director, its idea to go out and consume others. And if it is starting to become consumed, then you know that its life is near an end. For example, there may be a point where, very slim point, but let's say you're eating raw fish or a flounder or something like that. Well, the brain of the flounder, there is a chance there that it would like to consume you. But once it gives up, it hits that apathy state at 8 and gives up totally, and it falls into a state of anxiety and resentment until finally, hitting this area here where it succumbs and gives up and becomes part of your nervous system. So in other words, when you consume something, you're basically trying to break it down into electrons so that you can take its energy in and use it. If something consumes you, then you will be broken down into its electrical nature. Fortunately, there aren't too many animals around in civilized areas that can do that real fast. I mean, if you're near a Bengal tiger or something, something that could just eat you up, you'd probably go right through these systems. But this is a very interesting mechanism on the basis of mental aspects. And right here at 12, we move into a lot of mental ideas. We move into ideas as consuming rather than physical things as consuming. In other words, being consumed by, let's say, an idea of a person being fired from his job. Well, that could consume him, or somebody taking somebody else's girl or something. I mean, there's things that happen in the environment that don't necessarily mean that the person's physical structure is consumed, but their mental construction or mental ideas are. So we have to worry about that too. Remember, we put together a system, we're trying to handle a universal problem that is all-encompassing, and we don't want to leave anything out. Okay, now 13 is the adrenals. Adrenals. Oops. I wrote the wrong thing in. Sorry. The adrenal glands are the glands that are used for putting up a fight. They're really the glands that are there to, they say, are the fight or flight mechanism, but are necessarily there as a booster mechanism for all the plans and projects and programs of the body. They make the body do what it's supposed to do. In times of stress, when a person is trying to get over barriers, the bridging between being consumed and consuming many times is done by the adrenal glands. Because if you can get out of the way fast enough, if you can spark your body to jump out of the way of that moving cement truck, you win for the day, you know. And that's the major idea. Is looking at the win-loss factors. And the win-loss factors are very, very important to individuals. And again, radiation can build up. A person could lose $1 playing pool with his friends and commit suicide. And people say, well, what the heck? I mean, that is the most ridiculous thing in the world. And yet, what you haven't realized is they've had so many other traumas that have piled up that one more was the straw that broke the camel's back. So you have to see that, again, the mind can put radiation into a similar pot and say that it's all the same. And if it reaches a certain level, it's enough to destroy a person. So on this level, you have to look at actions which need courage. If a person needs courage to proceed, then let's say courage in the sense that he has to face the challenges with energy. If he's not facing his challenges, then obviously this area is being degraded. If the person is not facing up to it. So we have to look at this basically as an area of confront. The person's confront is low and he can't handle it, then he is going to go past level 13. Okay, we're going to go on to level 14. Oh, we're really moving along here. 14 is the mind. Now, you have to consider the mind as in the sense that the mind gives you the view and the perspective of everything. The last level was the win and loss. And a lot of people, a win and a loss is really a matter of perception. It's just like looking at a glass of water and seeing it half full. One person could win and say, hey, I have a half a glass. The other one's a loser and says, half of my glass is gone. So in this stage, we have to look at the perception of consideration. If a person looks at something in a certain way and it reminds him of a danger, then it's going to hurt him. So level 14, and many human beings are at this level, scenarios are created that compound the pressure. So if a person, I was just watching a movie the other night, and it was about an individual who was quite insane, and he had a girlfriend, and he looked over, and his girlfriend was being taken home by another individual, and he just was taking a piece of lint off of her coat, and from far away the insane person thought that he was kissing her. That was his consideration. Well, if he's that close, he's got to be, and he went off into a whole dream of how this man who was just doing this lady a favor by taking the lint off of her coat was actually making love to his girlfriend, so he went over and shot the guy with a silencer. This is the kind of movies I watch. But, you know, there was nothing else to do. But okay. Anyway, that's mine, and the tip-off emotion is that. Anybody that worries has got this. Because what they're worried about, basically, is they're worried that some of the things in their environment they're going to see in such a way to create more pressure. They're actually afraid to look at it. They've already missed level 13, the win and loss, confront, and the courageous part. They've already missed that. They've given up on confronting and being courageous, and they've moved down to worrying. And worrying is basically saying, I hope that it isn't what I think it is. That's all it is, you know. And they just worry that there's going to be a point where they're going to have to confront that it really isn't what they thought it was, or it is something else that they don't want. And they're so pent up in this because what's happened is the pressure's built up so far in the system, and it's breaking down the system so much that the person feels they can't stand any more pressure, which in fact they can, but they don't want any more. They're afraid to build it up anymore, so they try to avoid it, basically. Another area of the brain is a thing called the hypothalamus, and it's a whole area that we call the midbrain. And the midbrain area is very important. If that starts to break down, a lot of the balances of the person's energies start to go off. And a person cannot really perceive the value of things. In other words, things start to appear smaller or larger than they really are, and significances go off incredibly. In other words, they may have like a pen and pencil set that their girlfriend gave them 40 years ago. They'll try to save that in the fire instead of the family fortune. You know, I mean, they just don't see the relative importances. And we look at the attention. If the person does not have an attention span, if they cannot focus on anything, if they go to lectures and fall asleep, if they yawn a lot at a lecture, I'm only kidding. Yes, it's true. But if their attention is very short, then you have this problem. Because the person is not able to really draw out the importances and not focus on the unimportances. And what happens is, what puts them asleep at a lecture is that they are focusing on the unimportances and don't really see the drift of, you know, why the speaker is talking about certain parts of the program and not taking it in perspective. So, therefore, their attention starts to get all wobbly. Okay, 16 is the kidneys, the filtration mechanism. Now the filter, the reason why it's up at 16 is because we're talking about, at this point, we're talking about filtering really just the grossness of keeping things apart, trying to just demarcate what's yours and what's mine, just to completely separate out all of the poisons from the usable things, almost like panning for gold. Here's where all the fears and the phobias come in. A lot of fear, a lot of phobia. You hear, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, then all the way down to 16, level 16, very big. Okay? If you have a fear or a phobia, then we know 16 levels, that means we've got to put a lot of time in on the program. Okay, now, at 17 and 18, these two levels are put together because these are the hormone balance levels. And 17 denotes positive pressure, and 18 denotes negative pressure. Okay? So, this area, once this is broken, or disturbed, the person can actually begin to change. They can stop being who they're really supposed to be. And a lot of this is what is part of aberrant sexual behavior, or this person's losing identity. Totally. And we call this identification. You know, Victor, Victoria, you know. I mean, they don't know what gender they even are anymore, you know, and they go into these real heavy problems about who to identify with and where they belong. And the emotion is conservatism. Now, it's really interesting, because in conservatism means a person will not take any more chances anymore. I mean, they will not try anything different or new because they're afraid it's going to disrupt the harmony of the disruption. And in here, if you start with a 1718, you're talking about direct trauma. In other words, a person's been traumatized so powerfully by the radiation, the energy, that now the entity is taking them over, okay? And that they are now becoming the entity. They are more the entity than they are themselves at 1718. So this is like the wild card in your chain. If you see that, then you could, you know, that's one of your faces of Eve or something, or, you know, you're becoming Sybil. All right, not Sybil. Sybil is a person who has 16 personalities, but basically what she had was 16 very powerful traumas. Okay. 19th level, skin becomes affected. Now you gotta remember that at this point, the person's skin actually gets different than what it's supposed to be. All right? Skin changes. Because the skin is the area that demarcates energies. It separates them. It says, I'm over here, you're over there. Okay? But if they're all mixed together, then you'll see the skin start to behave in a very strange pattern. Now, this is really interesting because it says boredom. The skin should be very boring. There shouldn't be any action on it. If there's action on the skin, it means there's entities moving in and out. All right, there's entities. When I say entities, I know you're probably thinking of Exorcist or some of the movies with Barbara Hershey in it being raped by invisible beings. You know, no, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking basically when I say entity, I'm talking about a drug, a chemical, a poison. You know, a drug is an entity. There's no doubt about it. It has like a personality and it's trying to do something. Just like you. You have a personality and you're trying to do something. If I asked you what your personality is, you might look up in the book and say, well, I'm basically a happy-go-lucky guy and I'm trying to make a lot of money. You know, that's what it is. Well, with a drug, you know, a drug could say the same thing, you know. Basically, a very bubbly, like an amphetamine would be like, basically a very bubbly, energetic person who's just trying to destroy half your body. And cocaine would be a very laid-back, kind of happy, powerful person who is trying to blow the top of your head off, you know. And I mean, you just, you know, each one of them has its own little thing, you know. So it's interesting. A yawn mechanism is great. I like to talk about this because in the yawn mechanism, the person yawns. The yawn part is almost like opening the door. I mean, that's when it's like, you know, the entities are moving in and out of the hole. You know, you're trying to breathe more energy in. The energy is coming in and is really suppressing the solar plexus, which is number 20. And the pancreas area. Okay. And yawn's trying to actually suppress or stifle the expression of the entity. The entity, laughter. If you want to get an entity out, you laugh it out. For example, if somebody trips and falls and you think that's real funny, then that's the entity. In other words, the entity is, again, a personality with something happening, okay? Really kind of for instance, if you get a really conservative kind of guy who trips and falls and smashes his nose, that's funny, you know, and that just gives you the energy that comes off of it. 21 is the posterior pituitary. And at this point, you're just broken down to just a field of water. I mean, you're just now becoming just a field of energy, and that's it. Your demarcation is very, very lost. You're becoming fragmented, okay? At the 21st level, we have what's called fragmentation. Now, I'm talking about your personality, your drive, your idea. Your idea is fragmented. It's decimated. It's exploded. Okay, it's gone. You know, you had an idea. You wanted to be a clothing tycoon or something like that, and your partner wiped you out. I mean, you're gone, man. You fragmented. You're destroyed. And how do you know you got that? Grief. Anybody that cries. When you see crying, what you have is hydration, fragmentation. Those little drops that are falling out, that means that the idea, the entity, the you has been exploded. Okay? And now you're starting to go dripping the little drips. Okay? And that's why I say some people are drips, you know. You're a drip, you know. Well, that means that the person is fragmented, is broken apart, their idea is not solid anymore, and that's loss, right? Hey, I'm a clothing tycoon. Oh, no, you're not. I wiped you out, you know. You know, loss, explosion, fragmentation, tears. Psh. Faster the fragmentation, the faster the tears fly, you know. Now, somebody tries to hold it back. Many people you'll see with colds and flus are really due to a loss that's stifled. They don't want to cry. They're older people, and they've learned how to be social, and they don't want to just go up to people and cry in their faces, so they just go, you know, and they blow their nose a little bit, and they say, I have a cold, take contact. But I've traced many, many of these back to losses that the person's had. That they've had some real heavy losses, like things didn't work out the way they want. And that blowing the nose thing is like a fragmentation of their idea, but very slow. It's like slowed down into slow motion. 22 is the parathyroid gland. And this is solidification. Now, this is when the entity has solidified. It's taken over your turf, totally. I mean, it has become its own, you know, it's just taken over. And 22 relates to calcium deficiencies, calcium deposits, is many times if a person has arteriosclerotic block, you know, if they have ischemia, things that have just taken up resonance in their system. It's the entity. Don't kid yourself. I mean, you want to take a really nice picture and find a chain of information through the computer. We have a gun that we put right on the calcium deposits and talk to it. You know, like, who are you? What are you? Where are you? I'm a happy-go-lucky guy, and I'm destroying this person's body. You know, you know, that kind of thing. And the expression of emotion is anger. The angry person. Anybody that gets angered when you're talking to them about something very simple. If you're angry for a good reason, fine. If you're angry for no reason, suddenly you talk to somebody and you probe them a little bit, and all of a sudden, boom, they get very angry. You bumped into an entity. It's trying to just smoke screen you off. Like, hey, get out of here. You know, go work the other side of the street, you know. It's like one entity bumping into another. It's just a rejected process. You know? All right, I've only got 2 more to go. And this is all an answer to the question, how did I get into this? No, this is where did the numbers come from? Well, at least now you'll know where the numbers come from. Seriously, do you know where the numbers come from now? Really, by doing this? No? You want me to go back to Sanskrit? Well, this numeral. Okay, 23 is a spleen. Again, I was saying how when one entity is trying to bash into the body and there's already one there, they bounce each other off. I mean, it's really funny. Human beings just sit back and watch their entities fight. Hey, hey, I got this body. You know, it's really a joke, you know. But what happens on level 23 is after the fight between the two calcium deposits, you know, they get rejection, they get blown off, and a lot of times, this is the area of allergies. And that's what an allergy is. An allergy is like a rejective, hey, we already got somebody here, you know, we already got a paper boy, you know. And they just push all this stuff out, you know. And you get this really heavy reactive allergic process because they already got enough in there, you know. Already got enough banana allergy, you know. I got a banana entity. I got a rice, a chocolate entity, you know. All right, 24 is a lymph. Last system, okay, and the lymph glands, in this circumstance, we're looking at the idea of energies that are being completely taken apart, destroyed forever, and released, okay? So that means that the body uses the lymph system almost like a garbage dump. You know, it just takes all the poisons and the toxins and the materials and the losers, exit out the sewer, you know, and the lymph takes it, holds it, and then just dumps it. So it's part of the rejective process, it's part of the process of destruction, and so it's something that ends the 24th number and is the end of the whole sequence. And there's a couple of different terms here that may not make that much sense, but destruction in the sense of the end of the cycle, of the end of the program. Enthusiasm is the term that is used on the basis of, and I will leave you with this, is the idea that don't be fooled by that euphoric feeling that you have when you take a drug. Okay? Everybody's looking for that. We do these programs a lot of times and people say, well, gee, where's the euphoria? Where's the, you know, when I take cocaine, man, I just feel so great, you know, and all that stuff. Well, that enthusiasm is the tip-off. If suddenly you take something and you get a euphoric feeling, you better watch out, okay? Because that means the thing's gone all the way and taken over some part of your body. That euphoria, that enthusiasm that comes into your system is what happens when a drug's taken over your system. And every time you get that euphoric feeling, you've got another unit of addiction in your system that makes it that much harder to get that bugger out of there, you see. And it's this thing that cocaine does, and it's a thing that even programs, if you're doing a program, I don't care what it is, it may not be, maybe it's not a program of taking drugs, it may be some other kind of program, and you get that euphoric feeling, I would watch it, okay? Because the euphoria is reserved for something that you induce on your own. If something is being induced by an energy from the outside, then you've got to be careful of it. That is the biggest, oldest, greatest trick going in the universe, is to make a person feel really good, and then tomorrow you got to pay the piper, you know. And it's just like the Pied Piper, you know. If the townspeople could have gotten rid of the rats themselves, then they wouldn't have needed him, you know. But then they didn't pay the piper, and he took all the kids and took all their cars, and and that was it. So it's the same thing with drugs, poisons, any kind of toxins. You get that rush suddenly, and it's not self-induced, then look out. Okay, I'm going to sign this off. We'll probably come back for our next session. And stay tuned for another hot show of Help Yourself to Health or whatever. Okay.